first thing we do when you want to log in, it's really simple. You're going to go ahead and put your email address in. So since I have already set up myself in the system, I'm going to go ahead and put in my password. But for the first time, if you are putting yourself into the system, you're going to use the word welcome, all lowercase. Okay, so welcome is the initial password. Again, since I've set mine up already, I'm going ahead and put in my password now. So once you get to the main screen, it's going to look like this. It says My Concur up in the upper left-hand corner. Travel is the next tab. Expense is the third tab. And Profile is the fourth tab. Just to give you kind of an overview of the first page, My Concur is kind of what I'd like to call a snapshot to give you an idea of the overall expenses and travel information that apply to you. So as you look here on the left-hand side, this trip search, this is where you could go through and do a trip if you would like. I already have my departure city as DTW already marked. I'll show you how to do that in the profile area. But this is where you would put your departure city, arrival city, and all the way down to the portion where it says departure and return. We do ask you keep this economy class just because we're trying to be mindful of our expenses, and keeping that, we'll be able to keep that down. If you look over here on the right-hand side, this 800 number, we ask that you do not use this 800 number for customer support unless you are in need of immediate travel or expense concerns. We ask that you go through the system. It's a lot less expensive for us as a company to utilize the Concur travel expense system as opposed to using the support system directly. Next, you're going to see over here is going to be the expense reports. I've already created a report, so we'll be able to go through that during the portion where I discuss the expense area. Lastly, down here on the left-hand side is in regards to the trips. So I do have a trip here. I'll be able to show you that as well when we go into the travel information a little bit later on in this training. So the first thing I want to show you is when you get into Concur for the first time, you want to go ahead and click Profile. It's very important for you to go in initially and not only put in your personal information, which we'll go through in just a moment, but you want to go ahead and change your password, because everyone that gets into the system initially has the generic password of welcome. We want to ensure that you're protecting your information. So I'm just going to go through quickly, step by step, on what you would want to update inside of your personal information. So if you look here at the top, the first area is going to be your name. You're going to want to put your full name because this is going to be used for your travel purposes. Secondly, it's going to be company information. This is where you would go ahead and pick the required company. For those of you who are CSIG employees, you would go ahead and click Loris. Loris and CSIG for the principle of Concur are rolled into the same company. However, if you belong to the PEO, the UPG group, or Corso Care, go ahead and click that information. The next part is you're going to go ahead and put your phone number in. This is we would recommend that you use a mobile phone number. This is just so you have a profile pin with Concur. If ever necessary, you would have that information. Going down here to the work address, this is where you would put in the place where you're currently assigned. I am in the Brighton office, so I went ahead and picked main location, Brighton, Michigan, and then it auto-populates that information. Next, you want to go ahead and put your home address. So for those of you who can see it, I put in my home address as well as my contact information. This is where you'd put your work phone number, and then we ask that you put in your mobile phone number. And for Concur as well as TripIt, so Concur has an app through the App Store for both Android and iPhones. So once you put in your mobile phone number, you want to go ahead and click Send Test Message. This will send a text message to your phone, so that way your phone will be linked up for you to use the app. The next area you're going to have is that this email is going to already be there. This is the initial email that you got set up with. We recommend you go ahead and put an emergency contact here. This is going to be for when you're traveling to give them information in case they need to contact someone who is a next of kin for you. Next, you're going to go down to travel preferences. Unfortunately, none of the information from True Expense was transferred over into Concur. So if you had Delta or Southwest or any of the hotel information that you had already inputted into True Expense, you'll need to go ahead and put it in again because you won't be getting any credit. And I know we want to make sure that you get credit for things like miles and such like that for travel. Next, you're going to come down to where it says TSA Secure Flight. This is only required because with the travel, we will need to have that information of your gender and then your date of birth, and that's required because of travel purposes. For those of you who are lucky enough to have the TSA pre-check, go ahead and put your number in there as well, so that way it'll be auto-populated into your travel needs. If you'd like to put a passport in there, you can go ahead and do that. For those of you who are assistants and travel arrangers, what will need to occur is the person that you would be setting travel up, they would need to go in and put you as an assistant. So, for example, if I had an assistant named Sally Smith, I would go and have, I would be putting in information for Sally Smith. So then she would be able to do travel for me. Credit cards, I want you to just ignore this area right down here where it says credit cards. We actually have a ghost card through our expense system, which will allow you to utilize our business credit card for travel information. So that is basically this first section where it says your information, your travel settings. Next thing is we're going to go down to expense settings. The first thing you're going to want to go to is where it says bank information. It's going to be required that you set up your bank, that way you'll be reimbursed for your expenses. So here I've already set up my banking. You're going to put your routing number, your bank account number, and that way you'll be able to save that information. They'll send you a penny and a confirmation in the email that your bank has been set up properly. It doesn't take very long, but we are having our first date of reimbursement, I should say submittal date, is this Thursday, June 5th, and that will give you the opportunity to be reimbursed for your expenses. So once you put your banking information in, as long as you don't change banks, you won't need to change that information. Expense delegates, again, if you have someone who does your expenses for you, you would need to input them here. The portion back over here for under your information where you delegated someone else, this assistant arranger, that's only for travel, you would need to go ahead and set up both for the travel and the expense delegates. And then coming down to here, e-receipt activation, we recommend that you go ahead and activate the e-receipt option. There used to state, would you like to have an e-receipt? What's great about this is that you'll be able to get any e-receipt that we have on file with Concur, so that receipt will automatically be uploaded into your system. Not every single entity that we work with has this e-receipt activation option, but for a lot of them they do. That would make your life a little bit easier. Here is where you would change your password. And your old password, again, would be welcome, and here you would put in your new password that you would be creating, so that way you can protect your privacy and information. Then lastly, down here is the mobile registration. We really recommend that you go on and you download the Concur app. It's super easy. It gives you the ability to do your expenses on the go, and it makes it so that you'll be able to move through and get your information approved much faster, because you won't have to manage with getting that information in scanned and put in a later date. So this is where you would be able to get that information about the app. So that's the basics about the profile. Again, just to reiterate, you want to make sure you go in and update your personal information, get your contact information, and get your travel settings and expense settings set up. So the next thing I would like to go through is travel. So with travel, it's a really great system. It's like any other travel site like Kayak or any of the other sites online where you have the ability to get the types of travel that works best with you and your schedule. So here you have air, rail, car, hotel, taxi, rail, and flight status. And what you'll have the ability to do is you can either go through the step-by-step by starting with the air rail right here. And I'm not going to go through because it would actually create a trip for me, so I'm going to hold off from doing that. You'll be able to go through each of those steps. There is a few cool options if you want to just get a car, hotel, even a taxi, you can click on those areas individually. And for the taxi function, as long as you're in a larger city, you can go ahead and put in the information, the preferred address you'd want someone to pick you up. And this way you would be able to actually have a taxi set up to come to your place of residence or a preferred address that you have. This does not count for someone that hails a cab on the side of the road, but if you know ahead of time that you're going to need a cab, especially in areas not in a larger city like in Brighton or Milford, you'd be able to set up a cab if it's available. The last place here is the flight status. You can check on the flight status through Concur as well as the website in which you registered your trip. So these are pretty much the main things that you want to be able to do to put in a new trip. The next area is going to be this upcoming trips. Any trips that you have, they're not only on my Concur page, but they're going to be singled out on the travel page as well. So with this, you'll have your information of your travel. Take just a minute. So I have a trip here on June 25th that's coming up. Then I'm going to be staying at the Palmer House in Chicago. Right now, there is a limit of $250 for a hotel. However, it will just pop up with the box and saying, why did you exceed this limit? For this trip in particular, I did exceed the $250 a night limit. But what I was able to do is to state that this travel was outside of the availability of any of the other hotels in the area. One additional thing, we do have a direct billing with the Palmer House in Chicago, with the Comforts in Courtyard Inn & Suites here in Brighton, Michigan, with the hotel right next to the Addison office, which is in Dallas. And with this, you will still check out. You'll still use the Concur. It'll show up as an expense, but that one will be direct billed. It'll show up on your expenses when you file your report. So with this, this is the basics of the travel. Just one moment. I'm going to go back one. So this is where you would be able to also cancel your trip, and you can actually cancel and do alterations to your trip through Concur. You won't necessarily have to call the company directly. And lastly is if you had put a trip onto your expense report and you need to remove it, you'd be able to do that. So from that standpoint, those are the basics of the travel site. You're going to want to be able to, again, you can look at My Concur as well as the travel portion of the area to either set or look at current trips that you have. The last area I'm going to talk about is the expense area. So just like True Expense, you would have to create a new expense report right here. And I have already created one, so I'm going to go through the one that I've already created, which I call the first half of June. So you'll have a expense report out there. And as you can see, everything on the left-hand side here, this is my current expenses. So there's two different ways you can log an expense. I can see it as being what I like to call the long division or the short division. I'm going to show you the long way first, and then we'll do the quick expense, which is determined, I see as being the short way of doing division. So there's two different ways. You can either search from the list here below, or in this search function, you can just start typing. So I'm going to type in meal, and I'm going to say I had an individual meal. There's two different types of meals. There's individual meal, like I just went and got a hamburger, or if you went out with other associates or different clients, you would go in and you would click the business attendees meal. But for the purpose of just showing you how to do an expense, the first thing you would go ahead is pick the expense type. Next, you would go over to where it says billable. You will 99% of the time click no for billable. For those of you who know that you directly bill your clients for specific expenses, please continue to do that, but that is going to be outside of the norm. Most people are just going to click no. Transaction date, you can go ahead and click the little calendar, or if you want it, and you want to just go ahead and put the stuff in there, right? You then would put in the business purpose, and I'm just going to say meeting in Brighton. You don't have to put, you see how there's these red little lines right here. You wouldn't have to click those red, or anything that's outside of those red lines, but you have the ability to put in the vendor name. The city of purchase, this is different from true expense. This requires you to go ahead and put in a city of purchase. So I'm going to say Brighton, Michigan. Please leave this area where it says payment type. Leave this as cash, because that would be the way that you would get reimbursed. We still have the policy of $25 or less. You do not need a receipt, so just go ahead and put this in. And typically I would be using the Concur app, so I wouldn't even have to worry about having a receipt or not, because I would go ahead and take a snapshot. So typically at this point you would just go ahead and click Save, and it would save it as an expense. For those of you who know you need to allocate an expense, which means you divvy up an expense to someone else, you would click the Allocate button. But I want to emphasize, this is not the norm. This is for those of you who know you need to allocate an expense to a client or to a project. If you need to do that, you're going to go ahead and click here. Again, if you're a CSIG employee, you're folded under the Laura's name. But let's say there's a specific project. We have it right down here where it says project in parentheses. Take just one moment for it to pop up. And then under that, it lists every single client that we have, as well as properties that you would be able to allocate an expense to. So for the purpose of me just practicing, I'm going to do A+ Foundation, and then I would go ahead and click Save. So now A+ Foundation is going to be the one that will get allocated the expense, but it'll still show up in your expenses. And after you allocate, if necessary, again, that's not the norm, you go ahead and click Save. And now if you look over here on the left-hand side, that meal has been added. If you add an expense that you didn't intend to, all you have to do is click the little box to the left, click Delete, and it's gone. So then it's gone, and additionally, if you have an expense that you need to copy, you can copy it, and that way you would be able to duplicate that expense. So that's kind of the longer way of doing an expense. An easier, faster way to do an expense is go ahead and click Quick Expenses. And this little magic box will pop up. And there's two different places. You can either add a quick expense, which is going to be monetary. The second place is a mileage expense. This is really where I recommend, for those of you especially who do a lot of travel in terms of driving, you would go ahead and click the little map. And it would start out with your home address. But let's just say, since we have you subtracting the commute that you have from your house to work, to go ahead and click, I'm going to go ahead and click the Brighton address. And let's say I was advantageous and I drove to the Addison, Texas address, which is our Dallas office. And I can calculate the route. And the other thing you can do is make it a round trip. And then it'll figure that out for you as well. So you would just add that mileage expense as well. So those are the two main places that you'll be able to add an expense. Again, the long way of putting the information in over on the left, or the right, excuse me. Quick expenses will be able to have you do quite a few different expenses. So then when you go to the details, you can get some reports as well as getting an audit trail. Not some place that you're going to go very often, but the place you may go from time to time is you do have the ability to attach receipt images from images that you scan. And they would just go to Receipt, Upload, and Attach, browse to find the receipt image that you're looking for, and then you would be able to add it. It'll come up down there. You would upload it and then close it. The last area that you would like to is if you would like to print a detailed report, you have the ability to do that. But the last step that you would do is you'd go up here in the right-hand corner and you'd click Submit Report. And that way, then it's sent off to your leader to make any final adjustments and to approve your report. Again, we recommend highly, highly, highly to download the CSIG app, or excuse me, the Concur app. That will give you the ability to utilize the system from a mobile device, taking pictures and using that for your everyday expenses, as opposed to having to upload them manually. The last thing you're going to want to do is go to this area where it says Log Out at the end of your session to ensure that you've logged out properly. So in Rewind, the first tab you're going to see is My Concur when you first log in. This is a snapshot of the overall system of where you're at with travel and expenses. The next thing you're going to want to do is go to your profile, and you're going to want to update that information as well as reset your password. And then the other two areas, the travel and the expense, you'll use them as needed to add either new travel or to add additional expenses that you may have. If you have any other questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out to Laura Murphy-Rizik, and I'll be able to help you with any additional questions you may have. Thanks so much for watching and listening today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.